Okay, we're going to look at a pre-dynastic tomb here called Tomb 100. Got a good number on it. It's dated to the Nakada II period between 3600 and 3300 BC. This tomb we're going to look at is dated to about 400 years before the formation of what we know as Dynastic Egypt, whenever it came together as one. We're going to look at this original tomb, and I'm going to point out some things here before we do, just on the stylized shape of the tomb. It is a squared off tomb, and a side view of it shows it has been made out of mud bricks, like the Sumerian style, and pulled in. And this is, again, mimicking a style that you would find in Sumeria at this exact same time. Although there are a few that are slightly different than this, and some that are slightly predating this, and you can see a change that's coming along from rounded tombs to squared tombs. Now, rounded tombs go all the way back into much farther than pre-dynastic tombs. There are ones that are found upright in the lands of Canaan and the areas of that and near Jericho that predate 16,000 years, and this primordial womb or round type tomb that you see sometimes. So when we look at the area we're looking at, it's more of a graveyard. Let's take a look at this and give you an idea of kind of the funeral and mortuary complex type thing that are there, and where they had found goats and dogs and things like this that are also killed along with people, even an elephant and a cow and so on. And you can tell that these structures are built out here, and they're not perfectly straight at this point or anything, but squared off pretty well. But you also see these round tombs in certain areas, and they give them certain complex areas where they say, well, this is a little area and this is a little area. And where we're looking at here is in Cairo Kanopolis. So one of the very first civilizations that can be shown to have anything really going on in Eastern Africa. And there's a lot of close-ups that are here, but let's take a look at somebody else's work again, but showing you this tomb. When you look at this, the side walls there that were mud bricked were plastered over, and in that plastering over, art was put on them, and it wasn't just scratched in, but it was drawn on, and generally with the red ochre. That's a symbolic art depiction from God knows when. Actually, we do know when. At least 68,000 years we've been using this red ochre symbology, and it seems to go back to over 200,000 years easily, as I've shown you in some of these red ochre things and the symbology that I've shown you. But it oddly carries that long through humanity. It's amazing. Red ochre has a symbology that's carried through quite some time. There's only one boat that's shown here that's dark. The rest are shown somewhat light colored, a banding in the middle on each one of them. They all have little hubs and huts on top of them, every single one of them. But it's a fight scene, it's a cattle scene, it's a hunting scene, it's a bunch of scenes. And they say, oh, this is life up and down the Nile. Only problem is there is no Nile that they show in this. It's kind of an odd depiction where it's showing boats out on the desert for some reason, but it's somewhat symbolic, I'm guessing. And I think it is symbolic of the Sumerians and their second foray into Egypt, forming what we call pre-dynastic Egypt, and what I'm going to start calling proto-dynastic Egypt. Because there is a Dynasty 0 we're looking at now, and this is the kind of era that we're looking at that goes back at Dynasty 0, but it spans a time that, if you look at the other dynasties, where we have Dynasty 0, -1, -2, -3, right in this range here some type, and it seems to correlate well, the things we've been looking at. Let's just start reading this, and we'll make our correlations and our summations. This man is going to interpret the art that he sees here a little differently after 20 years of looking at it, and I agree with a lot of what he says. I may deviate slightly. Cairo Kanopolis is the Greek term for the ancient Egyptian city of Nekhen, and it's one of two major ones. There was Nut, where the gold was, which Nut means gold, and Nekhen, and both of these had attachments to the Red Sea through wadi and oases that lead to the eastern desert to the Red Sea. And I've shown this in a recent video group of 5 videos that I have, and I'm not sure which one I'm going to release first here, so I may release this one first. It all goes together, though, quite well. Hyracon means falcon, or holy falcon. Hyra means falcon. Hyracon would be a holy falcon, and Polis means city, and Kanopolis means city of the falcon, so this is the city of Horus. It was the first large settlement in Egypt at the time, and Egypt was not yet a nation. It was just a collection of warring tribes as we look at it. Tomb 100 is dated to the pre-dynastic period of Egyptian history, circa 3400 BC, before the unification of Egypt in 3100 BC by King Narmer, or Menes, or King of Scorpions. Cairo Kanopolis was his capital city. The tomb is almost 1,000 years older than the Great Pyramid. It dates to the very beginning of Egyptian civilization. Sure, there were people living there, and we find remains, archaeological remains that go back 6, 8, 12,000 years. There's East African 213,000 years of proto-humans that are there, actual Homo sapiens itself, but not the same people, of course, with all of that time going over. And you can't say that, oh, it's just the same stuff. So let's look at the era we're looking at. The mural of Tomb 100 is decorated the burial chamber of a local Egyptian lord. His name is not known, and we're going to call him Lord Hyracon. The tomb was discovered in 1899, but it had been looted by robbers a few years previously, so no valuable artifacts were found. The mural covered one wall of the tomb, and we see the layout of the tomb I showed you earlier. There were other paintings on the walls that were too badly deteriorated to be preserved, just disintegrated, and the plaster had come loose in so many places, as you kind of saw in that picture. The mural was removed and transported to the Cairo Museum. Tomb 100 of Cairo Kanopolis was later destroyed when the land was returned to cultivation in that spot. The mural is very confusing. For more than a century, scholars tried to make some sense of these paintings. It is described as a jumbled and chaotic mess, with hunting scenes interspersed with battle scenes, plus a random selections of vignettes portraying priests, dancing women, an animal sacrifice, funeral rites, you name it. It's got a cornucopia of things, and so they've tried to label it as, oh, that's just early Egyptian life, and left it bland and at that. The painting is most often described as a catalog of themes and motifs, a variety of unrelated images without any coherent meaning. When we look at the above image, you can see it, and you may want to reference it during this discussion, and we will go back up to it a few times. I recommend that you take a few minutes to study the painting, see if you can figure out what's happening in this picture. And we could do this for y'all, and let's see if I can click on it and give it to, it'll pull it up even better, where I can really get in on this. So you can see a drifting all the way through of all these boats, and each and every one of these boats has little hoods and little homes built on them, usually 2 on each one. So these are extremely large boats. In fact, if you look at the size of the oarman that's here and the little men that are on the boats, these are huge. And again, I showed you, there's these boats that hold 60 and 80 people. The ancient story of the shipwrecked sailor tells you that they had a ship that would hold 150 people, although some people say it said 100, that it says 100 on it, but 100 men. It's also supposedly some 150 cubits long. It comes out to some 86 yards by 60 yards wide. So some of these boats they're talking about aren't playing around. You look at the solar boat, which is really just made for a king and his voyage, not an army, and the size of it too. So people think they're having these little putt-putt boats that are like 10, 20 foot long or something like that, and that's not what's going on here at all. These are huge. If you look at my show on the Sumerians and their reed houses and their reed boats and stuff, you see their reed houses are made out of these yews that are upside down, stood onto the ground and everything, that are bigger around than most every tree trunk in the world. Giant oaks, almost the size of redwood, but I wouldn't say it's nowhere near there. But large oaks and giant trees that size, but bent over into the ground. You can see the depth and width of those, and of course you can put 4 or 5 of those together, and what kind of ship can you get? Double them up and make a length out of it, and what can you get out of those? But yeah, interesting picture here, all the way from people coming in. There's missing spots here and so on. I've seen the weirdest interpretations here not too long ago on this, where they say that all the stuff that is darker that cracked and went away is water, and that what we're actually looking at here is that this is somehow the way it used to be, but it's not anymore, of India, even though it comes out here wrong, and this is supposed to be Indian stuff, that this is supposed to be North and South America in one piece, and not even over and below each other. But they do show like these horses. And what's strange about showing horses, it doesn't look like donkeys so much, it looks like horses. And horses are unknown to Egypt pretty much all the way up until you find the Hyksos coming in and so on. It made a revelation and a difference to them. So this is a strange depiction shown there, that there's these people from way over here that have horses, and people scaring animals, it seems, trying to herd, trying to run them around. A lot of things though, but this is supposed to be all the Mediterranean, and this is of the known world, and like a map that back then supposedly people are saying, but I think they put too much into it. But let's see if we can get some rationale out of what it really probably did make a point of being. One thing that you want to note right off the bat is that the ancient motif of 2 lions being held up by a man is a motif that's the master of the beasts, and that's Sumerian. And it's seen in all the Gilgamesh epics showing where, well, sometimes he's got one lion just holding it and choking it, and he's a giant man, big man, Lugal. But other times they're holding them apart like this. And the Gebel Erak knife that we looked at in the Part 5 series is the same depiction of holding these in a separated way, and that too is actually pre-dynastic, and it's a flint blade knife with an ivory handle on it. Ivory, it comes from this area, but shows Sumerians on it. So it's kind of a strange thing. So he relates, the first time I saw a Cairo Kanopolis mural, my attention was immediately drawn to the Sumerian master of animals. His heroic stance between the 2 animals symbolizes dominance over the natural world. Because there are so many boats in the painting, I briefly considered the possibility that it depicted a seaborne invasion of Egypt by the Sumerians, the sea people. But I quickly discarded this theory for a couple of reasons. First, I knew it was impossible for the Sumerians to conduct an invasion of Egypt. It was almost 4,000 miles away by sea. And second, all of the boats are definitely Egyptian, not Sumerian. But then you find out that that's the same boats. The high prow and the low boats aren't Egyptian boats, but they're Sumerian reed boats. And it predates this date, them having these boats. Surely they had boats through this area here too, but the high prowed ones and so on seems to be their style, and it's taken on by the people of Egypt. He tells you it was 7 years ago, and occasionally he sees the painting in his picture file and would study it for a while, but couldn't make any sense of it, so eventually he gave up trying. Didn't pay much attention to the painting after that. But basically, if it's not Sumerian, then he's not interested. Because I guess he, like me a lot, looked and found that seemed like there was origins there that were much older. And if I'm trying to figure out the way back, then I've got to leave Egypt. Everybody wants to hug and stay there. It's so dramatic. But we know now Sumerian predates it by quite a few thousand years. And civilization seemed to have began there. So civilization began in Sumer. So the biblical tales start in Sumer, between the Tigris and Euphrates. And the two major rivers that are described other than that could actually be the Nile River Valley and the Indus River Valley in some people's thought planes. But let's look into this more. So a few days ago, I was idly looking through my picture file. Once again, I came across this Cairo Kanopolis painting, and I took one look at the Master of Animals, and I instantly knew what this painting was about. There's a reason why I knew this. It's because I recently identified the Gebel Arak knife as being a clear and equivocal portrayal of the Sumerian Seaborne invasion of Egypt. The Gebel Arak knife dates to 3400 BC, making it contemporary with the Cairo Kanopolis mural, and now the idea of a Sumerian attack on Egypt no longer seems so far-fetched. And once you start to see the Wadi Oasis that lead from Nekhen itself straight to the east towards the Red Sea, and all the boats that are depicted there, it shows them symbolically pulling them along with ropes and things. And that symbology is carried on into the very first Narmer palettes, into some other fragmented palettes that they show that predate and later date that. But this pulling a boat along and pulling a god along on a boat that's not even really in the water but up on a sled is shown over and over and over again. And it's something that just gets dismissed mentally by a lot of people. Here he stands between the two lions, wearing a belt and so on. And if we take a close-up look at the end of that Gebel Arak knife, you can see a Sumerian in his long dress with that belt on, with the animals putting their paws up towards him, but him having them under control, a large beard as opposed to the Egyptian beards later. You know, a lot of the people in Egypt don't grow beards well, and yet they symbolically always had this beard, and the gods and the Egyptians had beards. Only priests and priest kings really did. Most everybody else was fairly well shaved and had shorter hair. So this hat, this is a Sumerian hat. Now it doesn't have the horns on it, but this is the cuked or capped hat. Their other form of hat is much more pointy and bulbous on it. And in the 5-part video, I show a reveal there which shows you just what it would look like if maybe you took the horns off of that Sumerian hat. And then all of a sudden it starts to look like those Proto-Indo-European pointy hats that we've been looking at here for the last year or more. And it also looks remarkably just like that upper crown of Egypt from down in the south. So scholars have identified the Master of Animals as being Mesopotamian, and I think we've all seen that far enough times to not realize that that's where that comes from. But it's specifically Sumerian, not Mesopotamian. And all Mesopotamia and other civilizations later adopted the motif of this master of animals. At this early point in history, it was exclusively used by the Sumerians. Later, you can see it in the Akkadians and things, and sometimes you see a lot of lion hunting and things that goes along there, but not so much the exact motif that we're looking at here. First time I saw the Master of Animals on the Kanopolis painting, I assumed, like everyone else, that it was merely an item from the catalog of motifs, that it's unrelated to the rest of the picture. I figured that the artist added it to the mural simply because it's a very compelling image, especially for the Egyptians, as it will be explained later. This time when I looked at the Cairo Kanopolis painting, though, I studied it a little more carefully. I started with the Sumerian Master of Animals. Now, he's colored in red. I noticed the other men in the painting were likewise colored red, or this symbolic red ochre. Also, whenever you look at the Egyptians, they, in their symbolic art, are always drawn in a red ochre, even though the females are drawn quite pale, and priests and things. The men and the men in action are always drawn in a symbolic red ochre. The same thing's found in the Minoans and the Greeks, and all over the Mediterranean and really Proto-European areas, in so many arts. So these are the Sumerians, these red guys, and the men colored in white, well, they must be the Egyptians, right? Then I noticed that the red Sumerians are definitely the aggressors in this attack, and they are the bad guys in this story on the wall. Next, I noticed that the red men arrived in boats, and they had these special boats where the prow sticks through the body of the boat, kind of weird. It looks like that they're carrying them on like that, and that is a Sumerian reed boat. And then these huts that are on them, and people standing outside of it and on the ground. And here in the distance, although it looks kind of like he's right on top of this hut, is a little overhead or an awning, and animals running in the distance. Something symbolically in the front of the boat here too. And looks like the people all have their arms out, stopping some situation. Right? So there's your helmsman at the back of the boat. So the Master of Animals is quintessentially Sumerian. The invaders are his men, and they arrive in Egypt by boats. I therefore categorically state that in no certain terms the Hyrcanos mural, like the Gebel Arak knife, depicts a seaborne invasion of Egypt by the Sumerians. You may be thinking, didn't he just say it can't be Sumerian invasion because the boats are definitely Egyptian? Well, you can look at it two different ways really here. How can it be a Sumerian invasion without Sumerian boats? Funny you should mention that, but these boats that are high-prowed everywhere are actually originating from Sumeria. You know, you look how that would sit in the water and how it's real bent. And why would they have originally gone with that idea? And there's no sides to it, and it floats really with a large portion of this sticking up out of the water. The water would only be at this level maximum, and everything else like a banana sticking up out of the water. There's 6 boats in this painting, and this is the invasion fleet. Although it could have been a lot larger, this is just the way it's shown here. I mean, even though they only show 40-something people in here, there's more than 40 people. All of them face in the same direction. All these boats have the same palm leaf standard in the front of the boats. And I've shown that in the Sumerian and the wall depictions, but then also it disintegrates out of there. But where does it go back from there? Well, you find it in the Wadi Oases, and you find it in Sumerian art. They all have these little palm leaves on the front, and you can see the little makings of these. Palm standards insignia on the prows of the boats depicted on the Cairo Kanopolis mural in order of their appearance from left to right, right there that you see. I'd like to mention that palms and date palms The word for date palm in Greek was Phoenike, and that's where you get the Phoenicians from. And the Phoenicians are said to have actually come up through and done this same type thing. And this sea people that came from the sea and helped to invade. I was surprised when I first noted that there aren't any people on the boats, except for the helmsman that was shown above. Then I realized that the Sumerians had disembarked from their boats, and all of them were on the shore wreaking havoc on the Egyptians. Now the Sumerian helmsman is on a white boat. Therefore are 4 other white boats. They are similar in design with construction, with steep hulls and twin cabins, and they have the same color scheme with the white hulls and red cabins. This means the white boats are Sumerian, and one boat is different than the others. And it seems to be extremely high prowed and have that overbent type thing onto it. And here we have what later would be the wiggle that's around gods whenever they're on the boats and stuff that you see in pictures. The Sinister black ship, or dark ship, or actual wooden colored ship, belongs to the Sumerian commander of the invasion fleet. The cabin is richly decorated, suggesting royalty. And bitumen, of course, would be black. And I've shown you in the other 5-part series where bitumen has been found with barnacles in it and so on. And that lets you know this boat's been in the water for a long, long time, and salt water also. Amazingly, there also correlates with some ancient stories of the boat of Noah, or Utnapishtim, that was supposed to have been up in the Caucasus Mountains, that people would go to as pilgrimages and steal little pieces of the bitumen and use it for sacred charms and so on. And here's a Sumerian boat. And you can see the high prow and the high tip of it and so on. And this is a smaller boat. You can see it's got the slats across it, and it's something that's like 3 times the size of a canoe and 20-25 foot long. But the ones we're looking at in the pictures are twice that long, more. The black ship is the only ship on the mural that looks like it might possibly be a Sumerian ship, but it could just as easily be Egyptian. It's shown in the picture of Egyptian rock paintings. And so let's look at a picture of an Egyptian rock painting here. And these are what I've been showing you before about coming across these wadi and oases, where these people have this symbology here that goes up into Europe, that you find up into Bulgaria and so on, with this symbology of these holding of a hands and a priestess that's here and here on the boat, shown in here. But also all these sticks that you see, the ones that are down below the boat are like oars, but the ones that are up top are people. And so you can see some of these boats are carrying 20 people, 30 something people, quite a few people that are there. And these are muraled on the side walls, and there's that palm tree again and so on, right? The sacred house that's built onto it. It's like a houseboat type thing, right? Well, let's go back. Since that black ship is so different than the others, it's tempting to say that it's Egyptian, under the assumption that at least one Egyptian boat is involved in the conflict. However, the black ship is Sumerian because it's facing the same direction as the other ships and has the same palm leaf standard, and those are all actually Sumerian ships in the first place, adopted by them. And you look at this other depiction here, and you can see the raised arms in this, which actually looks like a crescent and a sun, and there's a lot of depictions to that. But I show you this exact art in that other series, and I may even go to that video real quick and try to pick a few pieces and show it to you to just correlate one more time. The precise rendering of the Sumerian ship on the Gebel Arak knife shows that it proves that it depicts a Sumerian seaborne invasion. The same cannot be said about the Cairo Kanopolis painting. As mentioned earlier, the boats on the mural are truly Egyptian. It's because the artist was drawing what he knew best, Egyptian boats. Boats he had been drawing his entire life, except for the black ship, which he made little pretense that he was trying to duplicate the complicated architecture of the Sumerian ships. Besides, he can be seen below, as can be seen below. The artists are not always accurate in their illustrations of ships and so on. This is a Japanese painting of a Portuguese ship that really just looks like a Japanese junk. It's because they couldn't quite pull off the way it looked somewhat, but you can see a little bit of the Spanish galleon look to that. So you get the idea of what he may be saying there, but I'm still telling you that those reed boats that were high-prowed in any way, shape, or form comes from the Sumerian concept in the first place. Do they have a convergence where people over here and people over there made the exact same thing rather than making them flat or a lot of other ways? And why do they high prow? Why doesn't it, once it comes up out of the water, you just cut that crap off like we do now? We no longer put these high prows and things on the end of boats. But you see back then and all the way through in Phoenician boats and the Viking boats that have that high prow still on the front of them, and they have that dragon head effigy on the front of them, and a lot of those, some of those pictures I just showed you had some of that. On an entirely unrelated subject, here's the act of smiting in one of its first showings, and it looks like he may be using a club or perhaps a mace. It shows you that he's got a little band wrapped around him, but also whenever you see that position, that's the position of Orion the hunter, in that smiting position that you see it. But there's never a good time to bring up such a delicate matter, but as a warning to the younger members of the reading audience, it should be noted that many of the men in the paintings, Sumerians and Egyptians alike, wear penis sheaths. On the Gebel Arak knife, all of the men wear penis sheaths. And you can see this. And you can see that there are people attacking the other people. And what seems to be going on is the short-haired people, Sumerians, shaved and so on, are attacking the long-haired people. And they carry them off or put them in captivity and stuff. So it seems to be odd with that. Again, the Egyptians and their penis sheaths. For the record, the Sumerians never wore this ridiculous apparatus, and it's really only seen in primordial Egypt, but you find it over and over again in some of these tombs and the burials where they've even done them on the toes and the fingers, and a penis sheath made out of gold and so on. So some of this is still kept. Some of it's a blending, if you will. It was much too primitive and barbaric for those Sumerians. In his opinion, it proves that the Sumerians were far more civilized than the Egyptians during this period in history, or they just didn't have that type of archaic thing going on. Nowadays, we look at the more and more advanced we got, the more humble we were about sexuality and less open, even though in a modern society it's kind of free-loved and came back out quite a bit. But if we look just back 50 years and go back in time, well, I guess the worst of it would have been Elizabethan England. Although the women wore push-up, broad, endowing, if you will, corseted dresses, everything else was quite conservative, posh-poo, and not revealing in any way, shape, or form. But anyhow, so there, he said it, and someone had to say it, but he digresses. Now, livestock. And this is a strange thing, and people have said this may be some type of zodiac, although if you're believing that, then back in the old day, the zodiac would have been deer horse, gazelle horse, antelope. And that's not right. This is actually like a pin. This image here has baffled scholars for 100 years. What is it? Well, first time you saw it, you think it's a carousel. And that's another good thought, too, is that you know how they hook up the horses and make them go round and around, and they use them to crush grains in mills and things, and also make the water carrying things. And there's auto watering devices that are built out of this, and you make an animal go round and around. It's possible it's that, but it doesn't look like that. More times I looked at it, the more it looked like a carousel. Finally, I realized it's actually a corral. The animals are standing in it, and of course they're poking out far from it. They're not wasting a large area to show it, but it's the idea of a corral. This is an important clue to the painting. You can't understand the Cairo Kanopolis mural until you understand the meaning of the corral. Notice that the animals in the crowd are not the usual forms of domestic livestock, horses, cattle, sheep, and pigs, because they aren't there. They get brought from Anatolia and Sumeria, and all of that comes from there. So they're essentially what we call the wild animals: antelopes, gazelles, impalas, and the like. You never see antelopes and gazelles in the corral. They're animals of the open plain, and they cannot be domesticated. Some animals refuse to reconcile themselves to captivity. They'll never stop trying to escape from confinement. They'll refuse to eat, and they'll eventually sicken and die if held in captivity for too long. You can't put them in a small little enclosure, a peekaboo poking type thing. You have to put them into a whole setup that looks like where they used to be, and that seems like they're safe from the people, usually by a water moat and things like that, like you see at large animal safari places and things like that. That's where you can see those type of animals, and not really trapped more in the smaller zoo. Although some things like giraffes and things you can, and ostriches, it gets to there's a point to confinement though, and it really should be much larger. Um, Nevertheless, the attempted control and domestication of wild animals continued by all Caucasians here, and it was an important part of the Egyptian culture for quite some time. It's part of the Egyptian worldview. It defined their proper place in the cosmos as the intermediaries between animals and the gods. The Egyptians kept trying to tame and control wild animals long after everyone else had given up the idea, apparently. There's depictions where it shows you Ramses and a few others, and they actually have tamed lions that they use and they would attack people with, but also in other ways they had them. Apparently, they would go out on a lion attack, and if they killed the parents and could get the baby lion cub, maybe they could raise them up to where they were much more usable. And now we have the idea of the first circuses, the first zoos type thing, and you see this starting to happen in a lot of places. And of course, these people and the Sumerians definitely have that anthropomorphic style of animal people, and very much interest in animals, and a lot of them they're domesticating, like falcons for falconry. And then you see it again in Hathor as being the cow goddess that brings forth life and the milk that it brings. And you find it's called the land of milk and honey and all of this. So Cairo Kanopolis was the home of the world's first zoo, if you will, then. And the king kept wild animals, including elephants and hippopotamuses, in places to display his wealth and power. It showed his total control over the natural world. He was the master of animals. This supernatural power over the animals demonstrated his divine right to rule. The zoo is dated to around 3500 BC, making it contemporary to the Hieroglyphics mural. This was the beginning of the animal iconography in the Egyptian pantheon of gods and goddesses, where you can see Sobek even as a crocodile, and Ibis, the knowledge of thought. The one on the left is Horus, or Horus the Younger. The one on the right is Horus. This is why the master of animals is such a compelling figure for the ancient Egyptians. He is someone the Egyptians could identify with, someone they could admire, even worship. To the ancient Egyptians, the master of animals was godlike and superhuman. He had power over things. Look in this mural set here, and you can actually see a building, what we would think of as a house today if you were to draw it, and symbology that goes with it, and Thoth, a corral of animals. But now that still looks a little more undomesticated animals. Here's cows, but with the size of the horns, those may be aurochs, and the ones that were not really tameable, more like a wildebeest. Down here we see a regular cow, we see goats, we see birds of many types, and a person giving praise. Here also we see crescent moons, we see people apparently in captivity, but then there's a god or someone that's inside of their holy dwelling. And then here we see three people carrying the standards of Anubis, desert god Min, and Horus itself. And these are the followers of Shemsu Hor. Now, detail from the Narm or Mace head, which is what we've just been looking at. Broad horn aurochs are seen in the corral and royal processes. Aurochs are wild cattle that can't really be domesticated. On the left is shown corral with wild antelopes. This is what these are depicting here. The captive wild animals demonstrate the power of the pharaoh. You can see the entire Mace head in another picture here, but we'll go on. On the tomb 100 mural, although the wild animals in the corral are not truly domesticated for in all intents and purposes, they're essentially livestock. The same is true for the wild animals of the field, and this is the king's sacred hunting ground and the animals that are there. Because of their long horns, ibexes are highly prized game animals for hunters. That's why everyone thought the mural had hunting scenes. But in the overall context of the painting, the ibexes are really just local livestock. And this used to be a much more moist savanna during this time. Like their cousins in the corral, they are just the livestock of the area. Basically, all hooved animals on the Cairo Kanopolis mural are to be considered the idea of local livestock. With the context of livestock, the animals are not being hunted, they're being rustled, they're being corralled, and it's where the ideal corral comes from. When looking at the Cairo Kanopolis mural, think in terms of tribal warfare, think in terms of cattle raid, think in terms of the idea of Catalhoyuk and the people that were there up to 9000 BC having cattle, and their god worship and their bull worship that they have that's carried through the Minoans and a lot of other people, and down finally off into Egypt. Now we're going to get way deep in our time here, so I'm going to go on to part 2. Like, share, and subscribe before we leave this one, and we'll go to part 2 of this. It'll show up in your top left-hand corner here shortly, and if there is going to be a part 3, it'll show up in your right. I don't think there should be a part 3, but there might be, especially if I show you some more of the video that makes the other correlations with you. Anyhow, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in part 2. Top left-hand corner. Peace.